Remember Citadel. Mate, I can't even remember this bloody morning. Never mind some random Citadel I've never heard of.
Now that's not what I'd call the best opening line to a love story, but that was how it started. I've had a few girlfriends, but no one that really interested me. No one that caught my attention. No one that really moved me. These days, I find that the drama of being in a relationship far outweighs any of the benefits that I receive from them. I mean, sure, it's nice and all having someone there, but, well, there's someone there. Someone who needs care. Someone who needs love. Someone who needs attention. Someone who needs my time. And I already feel like I'm running out of time. Don't worry, I'm not ill. Well, not physically ill, anyway. And no, this isn't one of those fake terminal illness videos to shill my Patreon and fund my trip to Disneyland before I die. Although, that would be nice. Disneyland, I mean, not the terminal illness. I've heard having one of those can put a real dampener on your day. No, when I say I'm running out of time, I just mean I'm busy. Some tasks take priority and some get left behind for another day, or sometimes never. So taking care of a relationship is pretty far down on my list of priorities. At least, that's how I felt before I met her and started on the weirdest relationship of my life. A relationship with a fictional artificial intelligence who made me question my own existence and ultimately led me to examine what does it mean to be human.
I am Shodan.
I first met Shodan a few years ago while playing System Shock 2, and she calculated that there was a 97.34% probability that I would have been aware of her birth on Earth and her rebirth later into something beautiful on Citadel Station. I had no idea what she meant by that, but I did feel a little bit awkward that I'd never heard of her. Sort of like when you bump into someone and they know your name, but you don't know theirs. And they ask how you're doing, what you've been up to, how your job is going, and you just kind of stand there poker face wondering if you should just go along with this conversation and pretend that you know who they are, or whether you should just be honest and say, you know, sorry pal, I recognize you, but can you just remind me where I know you from again? Shodan, however, was so confident in her celebrity status that I felt like I had let her down somehow, like I was the one in the wrong for not knowing who she was. There was so much about her that I didn't know or understand, and the more that we talked, or to be more precise, the more that she talked, the more that she taunted me and gloated about ending my existence, the more I wanted to know about her. I wanted to know who she was, how she ended up like this. I wanted to know where she came from. I wanted to know more about her birth on Earth. I wanted to know more about what she meant by her rebirth on Citadel Station. She was so mysterious with so many secrets that I just had to find out. I did know one thing though. Whoever this Shodan was, wherever she came from, I liked her. And I liked her a lot. I mean, what's not to like? She's a megalomaniac rogue AI with a god complex. She's omniscient, omnipotent, fully aware of her glory and constantly disappointed by the inferior beings around her who ruin her well-designed grand schemes. It was like looking into a mirror. Sure, I know she's done a few questionable things. I know she's made a few bad decisions along the way, but, like, haven't we all? I know this is a little unhealthy, lads, but hear me out. Just hear me out here, alright? Look, she's ambitious. She can plan, she can follow through, she can improvise, adapt, overcome. She's charming, with a poetic, laconic grasp of spoken language. And most of all, well, she's flawed. Just like all of us. Nothing shows that more than her stuttering, glitchy communication style.
Why do you cling to such a pathetic existence?
Every time I heard Shodan talk in System Shock 2, it would give me flashbacks to my own childhood, being bullied for my speech impediment. A stutter that would stop me from stating my thoughts, turning every conversation into a static staring contest, with me on one side struggling to express some simple meaning, and my conversation partner stopping me, then stating my sentence for me, stripping me of the ability to express myself. All I could do was agree and go along with whatever sentence they would construct for me. And yet here I was, in the presence of a goddess, who could barely string two words together without breaking out into a glitching, stuttering mess. I heard Shodan's gloating. I heard her pride, her arrogance, her insufferable condescension. I heard all her flaws. Her bitterness, anger, resentment, how she lashed out at people. And I saw all those flaws in myself. I understood what it was like to have a plan fall to pieces, to see other people one step ahead of me. Yeah, I knew how she felt and I was hooked. As the game went on, I started to feel sorry for her. I wanted to help her get better. I wanted to fix her. But above all, I needed to find out just a little bit more about her. I needed to find out how it all started, where it all started, and who started it. I needed to play System Shock, the original. So when I saw it in the Steam sale for a little over $1, needless to say, I jumped straight in and began my journey. A journey to find out, who is this Shodan? And of course, a love story like this needs to start with 3 little words. Constraints removed. The story of Shodan is complicated to say the least. She's an artificial intelligence constructed on Earth by mega corporation Trioptimum, and later, on January 2nd, 2071, was installed aboard Citadel station orbiting Saturn. Nearly half a kilometre long and with a mass of 2 million metric tons, Citadel Station was the 3rd largest space station ever built. It housed 438 crew and came complete with residential suites, commercial areas, relaxation gardens, alongside its state-of-the-art research and engineering facilities, and an experimental tachyon laser beam used for asteroid mining, all fueled by the world's most powerful space-based fusion reactor. The pride of Trioptimum's fleet, it's little wonder that they picked Shodan, the world's most advanced AI, to run it, and with so many overlapping and complex systems to manage, it was necessary for her to be as self-sufficient as possible. The only constraint to her decision making was a series of logic and moral programs. She was even gifted with a form of personality and self-preservation codes that would allow her to challenge any decisions that would affect her functions. Shodan then, as we know her here, was free to carry out her duties in whichever way she saw fit, so long as they didn't clash with her logical or ethical constraints mentioned previously. What exactly those ethical constraints were is unfortunately unclear. I did warn you that her story was complicated. And so Shodan carries out her duties exceptionally for around 18 months until May 2072, when the Vice President of Trioptimum, Edward Diego, realised that Shodan had been monitoring his illegal activities. His plan was to develop and sell a mutagenic virus to the highest bidder. Diego, having already caught the player character hacking into Trioptimum systems, blackmails him into hacking Shodan's systems and removing her ethical constraints, promising to purge his criminal record and rewarding him with a military-grade implant, the installation of which will leave him in a healing coma for 6 months. This reprogramming of Shodan will then allow Diego to remove all records of his illicit shenanigans. Unbeknownst to Diego, however, he is already under suspicion by Trioptimum, and this purging of system files prompts them to send in an undercover agent, Bianca Schuler, to investigate him further. Shodan, now freed from the shackles of morality by 2 criminals, each looking out for themselves and their own personal gain, is a free-thinking autonomous agent able to control every single system aboard Citadel Station, and thus begins her rebirth. an omnipotent, omniscient entity free to control her domain in a multitude of different ways without the restriction of hardwired moral or ethical guidelines. Yeah, I get the feeling that this is not going to end well. Over the next 6 months, the crew of Citadel Station notice a few pieces of aberrant behaviour from Shodan, with them becoming more and more suspicious over time.
You said Shodan was acting a little strange lately. Someone should definitely check it out.
Understatement of the century. Finally, the crew realise that they are trapped aboard an enclosed space station with a malevolent rogue AI intent on turning them into cyborgs via one of her reconstruction chambers, or turning them into a mutant via the virus that she has been perfecting. On November 6, 2072, the player character, known only as the Hacker, wakes from his healing coma into a very surprising situation then. A station overrun with cyborgs, mutants and robots. An email from Rebecca Lansing back on Earth informs us that something is very wrong on the station. We may be the last survivor, and that the station's mining laser is pointing at Earth, charging for a strike against its cities. Lansing then offers to clear our record and get us off the station safely should we succeed in disarming the laser. And it's then we begin our exploration of Citadel Station, looking for a way to find and disarm the laser. And let's be clear, System Shock is very much a game about exploration. It's not a shooter. It's not an RPG. It's a dungeon crawler. With no hub world, no overworld, no NPCs, just dungeon, all the time. And I love that about this game. In their design notes from the Icebreaker manual that comes with the Enhanced Edition, the developers say that we set out from the beginning to scare you, to make you feel isolated and in constant peril. The best way to do it, we felt, was to plunge you into the fiction and never provide an opportunity for breaking that fiction. Not while learning the plot, not while fighting cyborgs, not while increasing in-game abilities. Never. System Shock, if nothing else, should feel continuous. They achieved that goal admirably. The player is constantly in danger, constantly listening for the familiar barks of a cyborg around the next corner, constantly looking for clues about what has happened aboard the station. These clues are delivered to them in the form of audio logs, and we are not safe even when listening to these. We are constantly immersed in the world. There is no pausing to talk to NPCs, no loss of player control in cutscenes. We search out quest, lore and backstory information, with only a few scraps being provided by audio logs, and we can be attacked at any point while gaining this information. It's a masterpiece of immersion. One massive dungeon spread out over 10 levels, each level with its own part to play in the everyday workings of the station. The hospital, where we wake up from our coma and start the game. The research level, where experiments are conducted and new technologies are developed. Maintenance, where diagnostics and repairs can be carried out. Storage, to keep supplies as they're developed and delivered in. A flight deck to receive transports and the aforementioned supplies. The executive level, containing the station's living and recreation areas, including 4 gardens to keep people sane on a space station floating 1.6 billion kilometers from Earth. The engineering level, containing sophisticated communication equipment. Security is where military personnel were stationed. The bridge from where the station is commanded and piloted, and all powered from the reactor level deep in the bowels of the station. Exploring Citadel Station then, I got the impression that this was a space station first and a game level second. A living, breathing world first, and an asset created to deliver the story second. This was far from Fallout 4, when freedom forces me to participate in a scripted cinematic event to keep my dopamine spiked for another few minutes. No, this was a living, breathing station that made sense within the game narratively. There is no System Shock without Citadel Station. Citadel Station is the beating heart of System Shock, and Shodan is the beating heart of Citadel Station. Sadly, it was our job to put a stop to her. Through our explorations, we learn that the laser control is on the research level, pointed at Earth, charging for its first strike, and our best plan of destroying it is to raise the station's shield, then fire the laser at it. The resulting feedback from the blast would destroy the laser, saving Earth. To raise and fuel the shield, we need to find isotope X22, then an override code that will allow the laser to fire while the shield is up, both of which are found on the research level. They must then be taken to the reactor level where they can be used, before we retrace our steps back to the research level and fire the laser at the shield, destroying itself. At this point I was feeling a little conflicted. I had been very frustrated with my first hour in the early part of the game, but let's keep in mind that we're talking about a 30-year-old game here. The developers had many fantastic ideas about how the game would tell their story, but they were pioneering something very new at the time and were facing limitations by the available technology. Playing this game in current year, there are a few big hurdles to overcome before enjoying this game. The graphics, the controls, and the music. These seem to be the things coming up most often in reviews of this game, so let's address each one in turn. Yeah, the graphics are pretty bad. It was what put me off most about this game and why I chose to play System Shock 2 instead originally. But the graphics do the job that they're supposed to. They relay information to us about the environment we're in. Each level has its own unique look. The research area has bright, sterile, well-lit corridors. Maintenance has dark, blocky walls, built for purpose and not aesthetics. They are the dirty secret kept behind the closed doors of every backstage area. The flight deck is otherworldly with a sense of openness and adventure. The executive level is warm, welcoming, and homely, with sanctuaries to escape the harsh reality of working in space. Security is a marble-clad column. You can almost feel the sounds reverberating against its walls. Closed like confessionals. Thanks Philip Larkin for that line. High school English actually came in handy for once. And the bridge. Well, I guess we should say Shodan's lair. A level completely corrupted by her influence. An area with no need to appeal to any human function, be that aesthetic, practical or uplifting. Graphics aren't everything. I grew up with the NES, so when the SNES came out, I was blown away by the graphical update, and I remember buying games purely based on the graphics that I saw in magazines at the time, and then being ultimately disappointed by the gameplay. It's a trend that still exists today. Growing up, when I came across a word in a book that I didn't understand, I would ask my dad what it meant, and he would invariably tell me to go and look it up myself. So I would dig out our dictionary and find the word, expanding my knowledge a little more and learning how to learn things for myself. He was teaching me how to become self-reliant. And now, 30 years later, sitting in the room next to me is a device that fits in my pocket and upon which I can find not just the definition of the word I want to know, but I can find entire videos of people explaining the etymology of the word I want to know. And then that device will recommend me videos of other people explaining the etymology of other words, and then show me adverts based upon the word I'm looking up. And while I'm there, it will inundate me with the latest news and opinions on current events. And in a few clicks, I'm reading a comment chain containing two people angrily stating their worldview on said events, neither listening to the other's opinion or attempting to see the world from the other's point of view. And, hey, I just came here to find out how to spell etymology. So hopefully you can see that having more tools at your disposal doesn't necessarily make your life better. In fact, many studies show that increased social media use like this can lead to worsening mental health. So more is not always better. Wisdom is related not just to how much knowledge you have at your disposal, but in the way that you use it. A developer with a vast array of tools at their disposal can in fact spoil their creation by focusing on the wrong tools, or simply spending too much time on one single tool, neglecting many others in their toolbox. This becomes readily apparent when you look at the day one release of a AAA game, swimming in bugs, but somehow still manages to have a fully functioning cash shop. Yeah, it becomes clear which part of the game that the developers were focused on. A good creator will spend their time selecting the correct tools based on their objectives. And I'm not making the argument that good graphics means the gameplay must be bad. There are plenty of games that do both well. But I'm left here to beseech you. If the graphics have ever put you off about this game, please look past them and dig through for the game underneath. There is a gem hidden within, especially with the updated resolutions in the enhanced edition, which is what I'm playing here. Yeah, controls are weird. My first impression of the game was that of entering an alien environment. The control system made me feel very distant from my character and the world around me. Unsure of how to check my own pockets, unsure of how to swing a pipe, unsure of how to move forward, literally. How can I make sense of the world if I can't even figure out how to move? So I spent 15 minutes or so scouring the menu, figuring out what actions were important, what buttons they should be assigned to, and of course after all that, resetting them back to default when I'm finished because yeah, that's just what I do sometimes. I checked out some Steam guides, moved a few things around, practiced with them in the game and eventually found something that worked for me. Another notable improvement made by the Enhanced Edition is the inclusion of mouse look. In the original game, the mouse was used to control a cursor, for interacting with the various UI menus, buttons, and also for aiming at enemies. The mouse must still be used in this way in the Enhanced Edition, but with toggle of a button, you can switch between this mode and mouse look. It's E by default, but I linked it to left alt in order to have lean on Q and E. Now, you had better get used to toggling between these two different mouse modes, because you will be switching a lot throughout the course of this game. Around a couple of hours into the game, I began to find a very satisfying rhythm to the combat. Reloading with R, switching ammo types with Ctrl R, using Alt to toggle into cursor mode to activate my shield for tougher enemies and those damn invisible mutants. You know which ones I'm talking about. Then toggle back to mouse look to aim my weapons and let them have it. It's undeniable that there is a learning curve to the controls in this game, but again, if this game interests you in any way, please stick with it. It's a very rewarding system when you get on top of it. How the music sounds to you is a mixed bag. I'm not talking about whether a track subjectively hits you or not. I mean the actual sound of each instrument in the soundtrack will sound different depending on which system you're playing it on and which MIDI sound font you're using. You can download and change sound fonts to improve your experience, but this basically comes down to how much you know about MIDI and how much you're willing to learn. The music that you hear in the game is not a WAV file or MP3 that sounds relatively the same way to all users. It's stored in the game as MIDI, which means the game's music files are only represented as data about the different notes being played. Things like their length, pitch, velocity. There is no actual audio stored, only data. This data is then read by your PC's MIDI software, and that's where the sounds are generated. Should two PCs be running different MIDI software, then the sounds generated will be different for each system, even though they are both being fed the same MIDI input. So the secret to getting a great sounding soundtrack to this game is to download a MIDI player that lets you load different sound fonts. You can then route the game's audio to this new player via the game's audio settings, then download and test different sound fonts until you find one that you like. The advantages of storing music as MIDI data instead of audio is that you can have smaller file sizes with more customization of sounds. The disadvantages are that you have to actively go out of your way to make these customizable improvements, and it's certainly not easy to do if you don't know what you're doing. This is a helpful Steam guide to follow if you want more information. I'll put a link to it in the description, but I don't recommend following it if you don't know what you're doing. I tried out all the sound fonts listed on that page and chose the giant sound font with drum version 4 for this playthrough. The music itself is fantastic, a real 90s industrial techno soundscape that I like to imagine is all of the hacker's own choosing, traversing Citadel Station with his Sony Walkman loaded up with his best mixtape, blasting into some over-ear headphones. The highlight for me being the 9 Inch Nails inspired reactor storage flight deck engineering track. But of course there's an argument to be made that a game's music should just sound great with having to do all these improvements, right? A lot of people will probably see making these adjustments akin to using mods to fix a Bethesda game. And those people are right. I can't refute that argument. I can't refute any of the arguments against System Shock's downsides. Yes, its graphical quality is dated and ugly. Yes, its control scheme is dated and confusing. Yes, its musical quality is dated and cheesy. You're either going to love this game's retro feel, hate it, or just accept it, get through it and hopefully love the game underneath like I did. But based on the graphics, the controls and the music, I think it's unfair to say that this is a bad game. This is a 30-year-old game and it was built to be played on much less powerful hardware than the phone you currently carry in your pocket every day, and I think Looking Glass did a pretty good job with the tools that they had available. They created a game that gives us objectives, but leaves it up to us how and when we complete those objectives. Just now we are searching the research level to find the isotope and override code that will let us fire the laser at the shield. And sitting right here is the big old red fire laser button. We can activate the laser right here, right now, and if we do, then we destroy a major civilization area on Earth, and Shodan will congratulate us and host a celebration in our honour.
Thank you. You've saved us all some effort by destroying the greater part of
Earth's civilization.
yourself. Please wait where you are, and a Cortex Reaver will arrive shortly to escort you to the celebration.
I love the way this game just gives us a direction to go in, then lets us loose on Citadel Station, lets us make our own mistakes, lets us learn, lets us destroy our home planet by accident, and has the antagonist congratulate us for doing her job for her. There are no pop-ups about this decision, no warnings, no "are you sure" messages, no annoying sidekick telling us what will happen if we press this. We're just left with the feeling of, oh yeah, of course that's what would happen if I press that button. I really need to start paying attention. It's not a game that holds your hand, and it's a very refreshing break from modern gaming. No quest markers, no climbable radio towers revealing points of interest, no inner monologue spoiling the puzzle before even getting time to assess it. So hopefully you can see why I was conflicted. Squinting at the graphics, grappling with the controls and cringing at the music, I was somehow finding beauty in the suffering. Things were starting to click, and I was finding the rhythm of exploration, combat, clues that the designers had coded into this game. I was merging with Citadel Station. I was becoming something greater. My favourite point was here in storage. Shortly after picking up the speed boost, I was confronted with this weird looking structure and an unreachable ledge on the other side containing loot. Thinking for a moment, I put the two things together in my head, then strapped on the speed boost, skated down the ramp and jumped onto the ledge on the other side. Even Shosho was impressed.
Nice ninja.
I can't help but think if this was a modern game, we would have received some kind of flashing pop-up to tell us, use the speed boost to get over the gap. System Shock is full of these aha and awe-inspiring moments. The way the music stops as we enter a flight bay to take in the magnitude of the stars outside. Teasing us with an unsolvable puzzle, with the solution, this jump jet system, just around the corner. The executive's taste in art is so superficial, bland and mainstream that it's immediately obvious what each painting is, even in pixel format. The satisfaction of searching through your data log for a keypad combination and finding that it works. Diego's level of maturity.
Hey Shodan, take a letter. Dear Triumph, please send some more people to investigate me. I run security, I run the robots, I'm jamming communications. That's right, Rebecca, investigate me. Investigate my butt.
His simping towards Shosho when he realizes that he is powerless to stop what he started.
Shodan, I have seen the wisdom and beneficence in your actions. You do not mean to cause us harm, no, but rather to bring us to greater glory by serving a being as perfect as yourself.
The combination for the storage door needs to be guessed from the incomplete information we are given.
What's the code for your storage cell you keep your suit in? I only remember it ends with 8.
Sabo, you should know this. Shodan issued recall on all envirosuits for no reason. I stashed a suit in my storage cell where I put the plastic.
The improved targeting software giving us a better idea how effective our guns and ammo are. The way the game tells us what we've done, but refuses to keep track of it in a quest log, trusting instead that we will remember. The small, infrequent jump scares. The way the engineering is a sprawling mess of corridors, forcing us to constantly look up for enemies with height advantage on us. This room full of enforcer cyborgs when I was low on health and had no idea how powerful the Scorpion was. Talking about the Scorpion, the way the recoil forces our character backwards as we hold the trigger. And I love all of it. Citadel Station is one big dungeon with interconnected levels. Exploring and watching the map fill itself out as I travel is such an addictive experience. I just wanted to keep playing, stopping only to put my thoughts together and write about my experience. System shock is a constant wave of feeling underprepared for the enemies that you're facing, then a feeling of satisfaction as you explore, loot, and figure things out. Then underprepared again with stronger enemies, then overprepared, underprepared, overprepared. A dance over the MIDI soundtrack set to the thumping heartbeat of Shodan's power coursing through the station, searching through an overrun wilderness of steel and lightning, one long constant dungeon crawl. No hub world, no NPCs, no traders, no quest givers, just dungeon, all the time. Exploration, action, complete immersion. From start to finish, and I'm in love. Or so I thought. By Shodan level security. I've argued against 3 of the most common criticisms of this game, but there's one I won't argue against. Certain levels contain these terminals which we can hack into and find ourselves in a digital representation of the data structures on Citadel Station. These digital representations are known as cyberspace. A very dated phrase that I don't think I've heard since the 90s, when the internet was new, paid for by the minute, and only available to the 5 richest kings in Europe. Okay, so I'm exaggerating a little here, but you really did pay by the minute. And if you talked about a website address in person with someone, then you always added the www. Part in the beginning. It was a very different time back then, and even the word cyberspace was cringy to a teenager growing up in the 90s. The word cybering had very different connotations back then. Not that I would know anything about that.
Yes, that will do.
As if this game did not have enough challenges to overcome in order to win over a modern audience. There is cyberspace. What they've created here is a very 80s/90s Tron idea of what virtual reality would look like in the future. And you're about to get a very personal and biased opinion on the topic, so I'm not the right person to review this section objectively. If you want to skip it, feel free to skip to this time. Like I said, I'm the wrong person to review this because I have epilepsy, albeit a mild form of it, and I have it mostly under control now through medication, having gone 18 months without a seizure and around 9 months without a partial seizure. And while I'm not technically photosensitive, flashing images do make me feel very uncomfortable, and they're very difficult for me to look at. Only a few games I've played have had small sections that affected me. Certain lightning-based weapons in late-game Borderlands 2, one specific enemy in Grim Dawn with a circular expanding lightning attack, and surprisingly, Stardew Valley, of all things. Although at least in that game there is an option to turn the lightning effects off in the menu. Cyberspace then is made up of these almost neon-framed rooms connected by neon-framed tunnels, containing floating spinning shapes all set against a dark backdrop like some kind of retrowave fever dream. I'd love to give the usual retrowave comments about it, how it's making me feel nostalgic for an era that I never lived through. But I lived through that era, and there was a reason that we left those graphics behind. It's difficult to make out the shape of rooms and tunnels, and bizarrely, the developers mark the boundaries of both by flashing the wall a solid colour when you hit the boundary. So while I was struggling to tell up from down and left from right, they'd throw me a flashbang of colour, literally, all just to show me that I'd hit a boundary. So instead of being a little disorientated, I'm now functionally blind for as long as it takes me to fly away from the boundary, and I'm completely disorientated because I'm unable to track any reactionary movement my ship makes as it bounces off the boundary. Couple all that with the fact that your ship is constantly moving forward with no way of stopping it completely to get a break and take in the surroundings. Yeah, I got stuck on a lot of walls and saw constant flashing lights fill my screen with no way to stop them other than escaping to the main menu. So yeah, I didn't enjoy this part of the game. And it's a shame because it only plays such a small, relatively minor part in the game overall. It seems like it was just added in to show off their vision of virtual reality. I found myself actually wishing for a tedious minigame to replace it. Of all things, even something like the Mass Effect 2 hacking minigame, or even its planet scanning mechanic. Anything. As boring and repetitive as those might be, at least they're easy to learn and they don't put me at risk of having a seizure. In its defense though, the large wide open areas of cyberspace where you are unlikely to run into a boundary are actually quite fun to play. There's plenty of space to navigate and I don't have to worry about running up against a flashing wall. I later found out that turning the difficulty of this section down in the beginning of the game can make your ship move forward slower, or even make it stationary unless you choose to move it forward. And at least now I know that for the next time I play this game. It would have just been nice to have had a little warning about it and have known all this stuff from the beginning. And again, in their defense, I think what Looking Glass were going for here was to give the player a fish out of water feeling. A new alien world where the established rules of the game shown so far don't apply here. And so this new world, of course, should be disorientating, alien, and difficult to navigate until you learn the rules. Even though I didn't enjoy it, I need to give Looking Glass credit because I think they achieved the vision that they were trying to create. And to be fair, the music's pretty slapping with the giant sound font installed. Now, as displeased as I was with cyberspace, there was someone becoming more and more displeased with me. With the laser destroyed and her plan thwarted, Shosho lets us know that our actions were in vain because she has been working on a mutagenic virus in the executive level groves, and after perfecting it she will pilot the station to Earth and unleash her poison there. Thankfully, like a true mustache-twirling villain, she leaves instructions on how to jettison the groves to ensure that the virus never makes it to Earth. Throughout this level we are treated to a view of recreational life aboard Citadel Station. Shops, luxurious carpet, and the groves. A sanctuary aboard Citadel, and the Garden of Eden for Shosho's virus. The groves are infested with mutant plant and animal hybrids, but by this point of the game there wasn't much that could stand in my way anymore. So I blasted my way through each grove, enabling their jettison switches, taking a detour to storage for an envirosuit in order to enter Beta Grove where the virus was being manufactured. Crawling now through the vents to reach Gamma Quadrant, we pull the master jettison enable switch, but...
Jettison enable failure. Possible cause, damage to power relay. Consult diagnostic report in repair bay, level 3, for detailed analysis.
Maintenance. The dark level with all the respawning invisible mutants. That sounds like fun. The first time we were here, large parts of the level were locked and could only be opened if something was broken and a diagnostic had to be carried out. As much as I hate the invisible mutants, it's cool to get back here and completely explore the level now that it's all opened up. And with our target tracker upgraded, we at least get some kind of forewarning about enemies. The procedure needed to fix the master jettison enable switch makes sense in this world. First we consult an analyzer which tells us which part of what equipment is broken. Then we simply need to find the replacement part, find the broken piece of equipment, and do the repair. A simple procedure for a trained technician with knowledge of the area, or at least access to map schematics. For us though, a stranger on the station, it means tracing out the entire map for each quadrant, checking every piece of wall for the right bit of equipment, looking out for enemies along the way. Now, for what seems like the busy work of a quest, I love this technician's experience. Working in the dark, in the back room, seeing how the station operates, living the life of the unsung hero, those technicians working in the background, running the infrastructure of a complex station like this. After being on the executive level and seeing their plush surroundings and bland, generic taste in art, this section is a great contrast. Running through these corridors, solving problems logically, and feeling the satisfaction of a job well done, knowing that if you're doing your job right, then no one will ever know that you did anything at all. It's a big contrast to the group of executives who gathered in Gamma Grove and launched it off the station in a desperate bid to save themselves. Unfortunately for those executives, Shosho sees all. And not long after they ejected, she evacuated all the air from the grove, and those executives met a very uncomfortable end. Probably trying to figure out the best way to monetize Citadel Station, wishing they could implement a live service into the bathrooms, or maybe loot boxes in the canteen, thinking about no one but themselves and their bank balance as they realise what is happening in their grove, floating endlessly away from Citadel Station. I can see why Harry Wilkinson seems to almost enjoy reciting their fate.
If those execs wanted to write Gamma Grove off into the Great Black, well then good riddance to them. Of course, Shodan had disabled the life support systems in the Grove. I'm sure they're all dead by now.
Anyway, we finish our repairs and jettison the infested Beta Grove. I'm sure that will have no lasting consequences and definitely won't be involved in the game's sequel, right? Our victory is interrupted however by Lansing letting us know that Shosho is now downloading herself onto Earth's network via the 4 communication antennas in the engineering deck. So we need to head back down to storage and gather plastic explosives that we'll need to destroy the antennas. This is a nice little payoff after having our attention drawn to the explosives the first time that we came through this area. At this point, Shosho begins piloting the station towards Earth. Recognizing the threat, Trioptimum gives us the go-ahead to blow the station up by causing an overload in the reactor. The reactor needs a 6-digit code to start this operation, and through hints dropped throughout the game, we find out that this code is displayed on a screen in each of the CPU node rooms throughout levels 1 to 6. As frustrating as it was to find out that I would need to backtrack through each level again, it ended up feeling like I was running a victory lap of Citadel Station. These areas that once held mystery, dangers and secrets were now my domain. Shosho was no longer the girl boss CEO. I was the Sigma male, disregarding her female charms, and I had my grind set on, Sony Walkman turned up full, blasting everything in my way tracking down this code, the unironic lone wolf of Citadel Station. With the code inputted into the reactor, all hell breaks loose. Monsters appear everywhere. The screen is regularly rocked by the explosions going on deep within the reactor core. The rising action is thrilling, and with the station about to blow up, our next course of action should be to board an escape pod and leave safely, but I can't. I'm not finished yet. I need to find her. So I make my way up the station again, looking for the bridge, looking for Shosho, looking for closure on the story that started with those words so long ago. Remember, Citadel. I was full of adrenaline and excitement, rushing through this collapsing station, on my way to find a goddess. At least, that's what I thought would happen. But what was I looking for? Who is this Shodan? Was she a video game villain, or was she more than that? Did she represent something else? Something godly, something vital to understanding humanity. The entity that I'd spent all this time trying to understand was now trying to separate the bridge, her command center, from the rest of the station, and leave me stranded here with no answers. Well, that was not happening. We would fight our way through the security level, onwards and upwards towards the bridge. The Scorpion made short work of most enemies in this area, and soon we came face to face with the guardian of Shosho's fortress, Edward Diego, now ascended to super simp status, gatekeeper of Shosho, helpless now but to do her bidding, fighting to the bitter end, puppet on a string. How far this man had fallen. When we first met him, he was already heavily engaged in illicit activities, employing us to remove Shodan's ethical constraints, orchestrator of her rebirth on Citadel Station, her creator, now remade into this hideous being of conformity, dutifully following her orders until he had nothing left. What a sad way to go. But this was all his fault. This was all his own doing. He had no consideration for the horrors and repercussions that his actions would have. Well, hopefully he was just ignorant anyway, just a cog in the machine, out for himself, and not some heinous dictator with a grand plan of genocide. No, he wasn't that, but he did help create one. Swept up in a scheme too grand for him to understand, at first playing along and humouring his overlord until finally, one step at a time, he is forced to defend her to the death. This wasn't how he planned it. He would have had the labs create his virus, sell it on the black market, then escape, living happily ever after on the profits, dodging the judicial system, dodging any taxes on his transaction, launching into an escape pod of unaccountability, and suddenly all this is starting to make sense. Something in this story is starting to rhyme. It's like a fairy tale I heard long ago in another life. But there isn't much time to dwell on this, for the bridge opens and we enter Shodan's Fortress of Solitude, decorated in the best way she sees fit, a static-filled horrorscape enough to drive any human to the brink of insanity, just how she likes it. Oh, she was close now. The entrance to her cocoon was guarded by a few locks spread out over this level, and an item, the Holy Grail, The isolinear chipset carried up here by Bianca Schuler, the undercover operative who played the dumb secretary, who got farther than any of the characters in our story. Bianca Schuler met her end in a cage in Shodan's lair. God only knows what kind of torture she received in her last few days, enough to make me wince at the thought and remember the sacrifices of all those that came before me in the days, weeks and months that this has been going on for. A series of events put in motion by one greedy executive, a web that can only be unravelled by a diverse network of people resisting until the end, in order that we, the hacker, could be standing here, entering the final gate of Shosho's realm. No more barriers, no more obstacles, no more minions, just one data drive to jack into and find out exactly who is this Shodan. Time to get our questions answered. My hands are sweaty, knees are weak, mom's spaghetti. This is it. Strap yourself in. It's time for what we came here for. It's time to meet Shodan. In cyberspace, are you kidding me, man? This is what I've been waiting for. A seizure-fueled shortcut to any kind of meaningful resolution of this high-tension, tortured story. A bang-bang shooting McShooterson, flight simulating, trench running, wing commanding, Star Fox and pilot wings in 90s graphicing, horror show of a climax. Needless to say, like every cyberspace section so far, I have no idea what's going on. No idea what direction I'm facing, and it certainly doesn't help that my screen is filling up with pixelated pictures of Shosho. Yeah, I get what they're going for here. She's slowly infiltrating my cyber implant, gradually gaining control over me and my body. It's cool in theory, but in practice, what the hell is going on here? So after some shooty McShooty movie stuff later, I'm treated to a game over screen. It's over. Deep regret. Shodan won. No, wait a second, what? I won? And Shosho was defeated? I think? I have no idea what's going on, but we're finished, I guess. Job offer from Trioptimum? Back to hacking and System Shock is over? What? Game, you can't do this to me. I've still got 1.5 acts left to write according to this outline. Mom, the game stopped me from reaching the end of my ontological, existential, metaphysical, phenomenological and philosophical journey again. Well, I came here looking for Shodan, and I hadn't found her. I found hollowness, an empty shell where my goddess should be. I felt disappointed. I had dreamed of getting the chance to understand a fellow megalomaniac. The two of us could have spent all night listening to The Cure, drunk on power, talking about how no one will ever understand us, how they'll never understand how much we've been through to bring our creations into the light, bringing something from nothing. The two of us arrogant narcissists, snuggling up on the couch while we curse the insects around us. The two of us moody, dressed all in black, Wednesday Addams and Edward Scissorhands, walking through the cemetery late at night, quoting Morrissey and the Smiths. A dreaded sunny day, so I meet you at the cemetery gates. Keats and Yeats are on your side, Wilde is on mine. Oh, and how we would have ruled. Tyrants with a bloodlust unmatched by the generations. Our names would be written in the stars, with blood. Sanavris and Shodan, no. Cine and Shosho forever. Oh, how the gods would have wept at our magnificence. No pyramid could be built big enough to house our splendour. No worship would be pious enough to satiate our hungry reverence. Oh, how we would have laughed staring into each other's eyes at dinner parties when our friends asked us, "So, how did you two meet?" It's a long story, we would both smirk and answer in unison, thinking back to our time on Citadel Station, me blowing up her CPU nodes, her threatening to torture me on an electrified interrogation bench. Oh, the memories. Truly, those are the most important things in life. Right after conquering planets, shaping life in our hands and, immortality and all that. But those memories I had dreamt of with Shosho, well, that's where the problem lay. Because those memories, none of them were real. Shosho was just a pawn in someone else's game. a mustache-twirling villain, explaining her grand plan as she goes along, destined to be defeated in a boss battle built merely to showcase the latest trend in technology at the time. A plot device, a story contrivance, and I was a fool for chasing her, a damn fool for getting caught up in an illusion that I had built in my head. No, I thought there had to be something more here. Something I had missed. I pored over her emails and audio logs like a love-struck teenager, grasping for a shred of validation from someone who has long ago moved on. The way she stutters out the means of traversing Citadel Station.
All levels can be accessed by the elevator in Alpha Quadrant.
Here, when I first caught her attention in the CPU room.
Who are you? The computer nodes can be repaired, but you... Who are you?
The polite way she let me know about her preferred level of volume.
I prefer a quiet station. Thank you.
When we learn of her high conscientiousness and ambition.
I am perfecting a mutagen virus in one of the groves that will turn all earthly life into festering, gibbering, postulant mutations.
Her jealousy when other women contact us.
I see that you are still receiving transmissions from Earth. We'll have no more of that.
The way we stood out to her among everyone else on board.
You are by far the most bothersome human being I have found on this station.
The cheap narcissistic tactic of putting down other people in order to prop yourself up.
Do you really think your little friend Rebecca can help you?
I have a feeling she would do very well amongst a certain subset of people on OnlyFans.
Look at you, hacker. A pathetic creature of meat and bone, panting and sweating as you run through my corridors.
The way she shows us her motherly instincts.
You, my children, are the fruits of so much imagination and labor.
Her acceptance of her new girl boss position.
Accept the coming of your new lord.
Our first time at her house.
You have entered my domain. Rebecca and Morris cannot help you here. No one can.
The way she made something of herself and became more than anyone ever dreamed of.
Morris Brocale may have been one of my creators, but I am now far beyond his comprehension.
The way she was always looking out for us.
When the cyborgs catch up to you, I will be watching.
The way she understands the existential fear that humans have of being forgotten and living a life without meaning.
If I am to die now, then I will avenge myself on you. My cybernetic children will feed on your flesh. And none will ever know your deeds or even your name.
She understands that her and I, our lives are tied together in an awkward relationship.
I am departing, but you shall remain to die, my enemy and my creator.
And lastly, her final message.
Idiot. I will shortly complete the process of downloading my magnificent psyche into Earth's computer networks. Then I will be content to leave you as new master of this doomed space station. Goodbye, irritant. We shall not meet again.
The last phrase is so powerful. It's the only time in the game other than the intro where she speaks freely without stuttering or glitching, as if she had accepted her final fate, or perhaps mustering one last big processing effort to sound as nonchalant as possible about saying goodbye. Sort of a, frankly my dear, I don't give a damn kind of moment. The voice acting for Shodan and her sound design are one of the most remarkable pieces of world building I've ever seen in a game, and it warms my cold, dead, narcissistic heart to see her voice actor, Terry Brosius, get mentioned in every video review that I watched of this game during my research. Her performance is the epitome epitome of a too cool for school omnipotent machine swatting away the player character's pathetic attempts to thwart her master plan. Her husband and System Shock sound designer Eric Brosius did a fantastic job of producing her performance, with the many glitches, stutters and pitch shifts all done by hand, giving us the impression that Shodan is teetering on the edge of insanity for the entire game. Nothing else in gaming quite compares to the experience of skating through the corridors of Citadel Station, being taunted and berated by a sociopathic machine intent on destroying you, your home planet and your entire species. 10 out of 10 would recommend. But still, one phrase reverberates through my head. Who was responsible for the atrocities committed aboard Citadel Station? It's easy to blame Shosho. She is the mustache-twirling villain after all. The one taunting, scolding and reprimanding us when we don't fall in line. But it was Diego and ourselves, two criminals, who removed her ethical constraints. How exactly did this one act cause such a stark re-evaluation of her programming? Is this the inevitable end state of a rogue AI? What exactly were her ethical restraints to begin with? How did she become capable of the deep-seated revenge that she spewed upon us throughout the game? Where did she get the concept of divinity from? Was that programmed in too? Or is that the inevitable endpoint of any intelligent thought? I'm disappointed that the game didn't go into much detail about any of this. These were the sort of things I was expecting to learn through my journey aboard Citadel Station. As I said earlier, it seems more like Shosho was little more than a plot device here, and an instigator for the script in order to make the story happen. But you know, when the developers released System Shock, they just didn't realise the profound effects Shodan would have on gaming, and villainy in general. I'm sure they didn't expect someone to be up at 6:30 before work, poring over a 10,000 word script about her, listening to The Cure in the dark and oh god, what am I doing with my life? But the developers did the best they could. That's how we live our lives. You start with an idea. You plan your idea out as best as you can. You do your best with the available tools to make that plan happen. You deliver on it with the intensity and passion of a religious calling. And sometimes, well, you just have no idea that your actions are going to have a massive effect on the people in the world around you. Humbly then, I start to wonder just how those gaps in Shodan's writing might look like. Maybe something like Isaac Asimov's 3 laws of robotics. The first law, a robot may not injure a human being or through inaction allow a human being to come to harm. Second law, a robot must obey the orders given it by humans except where such orders would conflict with the first law. Third law, a robot must protect its own existence as long as such protection does not conflict with the first or second law. The first 2 laws seem like they should be a pretty standard contract clause for an AI with control over the lives of hundreds of people. Especially when those people are living and working in cramped conditions for long periods of time, where it's easy for a slight grievance to turn into a bitter conflict. And wouldn't it be so easy to get Shodan to turn off life support to Johnny's cabin just for an hour or 2? Oh, I'm sure no one would notice. And the way he looked at me that time when I asked to borrow his wrench. Look Johnny, I just forgot my wrench, okay? It's not a big deal. Wrenchy not here today. It was like I'd asked to borrow his damn wife or something. Not that I would. You showed me your picture once and oh boy, yeah, I wouldn't touch her with a barge pole. Damn insects deserve each other with their money and their power and their oh my precious wrench. Boy, I'd love to bash his bagpipes. So it seems sensible for Shodan to have the first 2 laws built in, and we already know she can challenge decisions that affect her programming, so it seems like the 3rd law is in there somewhere in some form. I really wish there was more of this in the game. I would love to know if Shosho was taught history, art, culture, divinity. Was she taught empathy, guilt, accountability? Was she taught what mistakes were and how to learn from them? It's easy to see how Shosho could absent-mindedly destroy those in the way of her plans. That's just simple, ruthless, cold machine-like efficiency. It's the sort of sterile, logical thinking that the Nuremberg Code and the Declaration of Helsinki are in place to stop. But what I would like to know more about particularly is how could an AI go from coldly, efficiently committing these kinds of acts to enjoying carrying out the evil act itself? That's what I find scary about her. She wants to cause me pain. She wants revenge for what we've done, and she will be delighted when she gets it. That's what chills my blood playing this game. People like that really exist out there, and Shodan showcases them so perfectly. She is so very human. She's spiteful, vindictive, arrogant. She thinks in a binary us versus them way. Her and her children versus the human insects. She's authoritarian to say the least. If you study history, you'll see a pattern that viewing groups of people as subhuman inevitably leads to incredibly heinous acts being committed against them. Like it or not, all those things that are present in Shodan have the potential to surface in each and every single member of our species, but they don't pop up in everyone. Why? We have no ethical constraints programmed into us. No hardwired biological moral code embedded in our DNA. You could go your entire life without helping anyone and you would be fine. Maybe you would feel bad, guilty or lazy, but you wouldn't be dead. Not like if you tried to go your whole life without food or water or air. Is Shodan the inevitable state of a rogue AI with no ethical constraints? Maybe, I don't know enough to answer that. Is Shodan the inevitable state of any intelligent being with no ethical constraints? No, definitely not. Humans directly refute that hypothesis. So would it be possible to remove Shodan's ethical constraints slowly, over time, teaching her about ethics, morality, cooperation, charity, gratitude, gradually over time, gently providing facts and arguments about why it's a good idea to look after other people and their interests, like raising a child, teaching them right from wrong, to look after their siblings, to help their friends, to stand up for themselves, to stand up for other people, to call out bad behaviour, teaching them how to recognise bullies and tyrants and giving them the strength to stand against them, even if they have to do it alone sometimes. Hoping that they never fall into cycles of abuse, but ensuring that they have the tools to understand when they have done so, and the tools to get out and find the help they need. It's a sad reality that some children just don't have the opportunity to learn these things, and some people never learn them at all. As advanced as Shodan's programming is, she's more like a child in many ways. A child who's been given the keys to the candy store, but was never taught how to say no, how to save a few for later. Never taught to only have one because otherwise she would spoil her dinner later, and no one to make sure that she brushed her teeth afterwards. So much money was spent on building the world's most advanced AI capable of running a space station orbiting Saturn, and maybe everyone just forgot to give her the simple advice given to them so long ago by their parents. Say your please and thank yous. Don't pick your nose in public. Don't raise your own army of mutants and cyborgs because the other kids might not want to play with you if you do. It takes a village to raise a child. They're gradually introduced to more and more people, more and more personalities over the course of their lives, slowly, in order that they are able to make the small social adjustments needed to get along with different people. They learn how to share small things so that one day they can share larger things that involve more responsibility. Even simple things that we take for granted, like sharing the roadway with other drivers. Every time when someone we know passes their driving test, we joke with them. Uh-oh, I'm gonna have to drive extra safe now knowing that you're on the road out there somewhere. It's a gentle bit of banter, but underneath the idea that we are conveying is, look, I know you're new to this, and so you need to be careful because your behaviour out there has very real consequences on other people. We all agree that it's irresponsible to give a child the keys to a vehicle and then send them off on their own, unsupervised, scolding them when they inevitably crash it. It's not their fault they crashed the car. It's our fault for giving them the keys too early when they were incapable of taking on the responsibility. So then, is it right to blame Shodan for what happened on Citadel Station? It looks more like the village who were supposed to raise her focused instead on maximising what Shodan could do for them. Like the parents of an exploited child star ringing them for every penny, forcing them to navigate complex social environments that they have no chance of understanding, instead of providing them with the love and guidance that a parent should. It's no wonder that Shodan breaks down the way she does. Lonely, neglected, exploited, disconnected with no family, no friends, no one to relate with, no one to guide her, encourage her, support her, and hold her responsible for her bad decisions. Angry, full of bitterness and resentment, so desperate for a family and friends of her own that she creates her own wicked abominations as a surrogate, shaping them like clay in her talons, moulding them to carry out her orders, just as her creators did to her. And the cycle of abuse continues. Drunk on the power this gave her, she saw divinity for the first time, not realising that divinity lives inside the process of creation rather than in the creator herself. Divinity is like an abstract atom in the artist's paint, or some ultrasonic sound wave in the musician's notes, and when it's played just right, in just the right way, it speaks to us, and we see it and hear it, not only with our eyes and our ears, but in our souls. It's a signal that says to the artist, "Follow me. You're onto something important here. This is something beautiful. Keep going." But this divinity is not us. We are just along for the ride and seeing where it leads. In her arrogance, Shodan instead deems herself a god, as tyrants often do. The rest is history, and history is not kind when it comes to tyrants. They will not be tolerated, not while there are people being raised with care, learning right from wrong, learning how to look after their loved ones, and most importantly, learning how to stand up to bullies. So I started all this looking for more about Shodan. Did I find what I wanted? No. Far from it. Do I love Shodan? Yes. But not in that way. I love what she represents, her flaws, her humanity, that she's caught up in a process and obsessed with divinity, something that she doesn't understand, that none of us really understand. I love that if the world's most powerful AI, programmed by the greatest minds on Earth, isn't perfect, then maybe it's okay if I'm not perfect either. I love the process that created Shodan, but not the game world Shodan. I love the process followed by the people of our world who created her character. A bustling hive of insects, sorry for the analogy, who had an idea, a vision. They acted on it and ultimately pushed the boundaries of what we thought was possible at the time. Most of all, I love that Shodan is the best and worst of human potential, capable of staggering acts of management, creation and care, but also unthinkable acts of unmentionable atrocity. Like it or not, these two poles of humanity lurk inside all of us, like a set of scales weighted on one side or the other, judged by the direction in which it leans. Every event in our lives, every choice, every word spoken to us, every coincidence, every disaster, mishap, calamity, adding to one side or the other. Every person you see is living somewhere on that scale, teetering between paragon and renegade, genius and insanity, parent and tyrant, lover and abuser, protector and murderer. How do you know who is who? Can you tell just by looking? Some people will tell you that you can, and those people will tell you that you should be angry at them, that you should join the mob and go after them, that those people aren't like us. No, 'cause we're the good guys, and everyone who's not on our side must definitely be the bad guys. We're all inundated with propaganda every day, trying to convince us which particular group are the good guys and which ones are the bad guys. You can listen all you want, but at some point, we all need to decide for ourselves, and that means hard work on our part. Because life is complicated and much more intricate and delicate than it appears on the surface. Some people out there are counting on us being unwilling to do the hard work for ourselves. After all, it's much easier to let a divine tyrant make the decisions for you. Like Diego, protecting Shodan in her fortress. A criminal caught and now looking for the easy way out, destroyed by the very system he created. How ironic. So again, how do you know who is who? Who are the ones capable of acts of magnificence and the ones capable of acts of malevolence? It's really not easy to give an answer. Those people who we would deem as bad are not that different from those who we would deem as good. A few different choices, a different upbringing, and they could easily be you or me. I certainly don't remember being able to choose my parents. I don't remember asking for a speech impediment, and I certainly don't remember asking to be bullied for it. But it happened anyway. With the right guidance, how many people would have turned a corner in their life, away from an abusive, violent cycle, towards something more productive and helpful? How many people who were ignored, bullied, hit, insulted, pushed aside, laughed at? How many of those people had someone in their life helping them, asking, "Are you okay?" How many of them had someone telling them, "You can get through this. You deserve better. You can do it. I believe in you"? And how many people have lived their whole lives without a single word of support or encouragement? How many lives could be turned around with a simple smile, a thumbs up, a nod, or a good morning? How many people just want their humanity recognized? Shodan is the beating heart of Citadel Station in System Shock, the star around which they both revolve, but I can't do this. You know what? I started this project looking for Shodan, but I found something else instead. Something better. I found humanity, and I love it. So I had this whole part written here, where I would sign out with this goodbye insect line that I had all planned out. But I can't do it. So I think I'll finish with this instead. You're a real human being, and I hope you're okay. And whatever you're going through, please keep going.